Hi, this is State Senator Tom George. Welcome to my program, Current Events. Today I have with me Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, Justice Clifford W. Taylor. Justice Taylor, welcome to my program.
Thank you, Senator. Nice to be here.
And I always start my program just asking my guests to say a little bit about themselves. I know originally you're from Flint, and you practiced as an attorney for a couple decades before joining the judiciary, correct?
Right. Well, I was raised in Flint, and after high school went to the University of Michigan, and then upon graduation went to law school in Washington at George Washington University. And when I came out, I was a line officer in the Navy. I was on a destroyer for several years in the Atlantic. And then following that, I was on an admiral's staff, which was interesting. Then I came back to Michigan with my wife, who I'd met in law school, was and is a lawyer. And we settled in the Lansing area. She went to work for the legislature. She was the first Republican counsel for the legislature, and then later for the Senate, and then later, interestingly, for Governor Engler. I became a prosecutor in the central part of the state in the Ingham County office. And then about 3 or 4 years later, went into the private practice of law, where I remained for 20 years until 1992, when recently elected Governor Engler appointed me to the Court of Appeals, where I stayed for about 5.5 years. I was reelected once during that time. And then in '97, Justice Dorothy Riley, a really quite wonderful woman, became ill and left the Supreme Court. She's one of the 7 members of the court. She left the court for health reasons, and the governor appointed me. I then had to stand for election in 1998 to complete her term, which ended in the year 2000, and then I had to run again statewide in 2000. So it was quite an interesting and harrowing experience to run statewide twice in 2 years, but I managed to successfully do that. Since 2005, I've been the Chief Justice of the court.
Is the Chief Justice elected by all the justices from among themselves?
Yes, Michigan is one of the states where, unlike the federal system, where the person is nominated to be the Chief Justice, here, nominated and appointed to be the Chief Justice, here, we are all justices, and then one of us becomes the chief.
Now, Justice Taylor, I've read that the Wall Street Journal has called the Michigan Supreme Court the best state court in the land. Why is that?
I think, well, first of all, it's very kind of them to say that. I think it actually is probably true. And the reason for it is that this court is a pace-setting court in the United States in sort of attempting to reestablish a serious legal culture in this society. The dominant thinking on the current Supreme Court is to attempt to get this court, and indeed all the courts in the state, out of the business of making law, leave that to the legislature, and take what the legislature gives us, assuming it's constitutional, which most always it is, and interpret that honestly, not putting a spin on it for what we would like the law to be, but simply enforcing the law as it is. You wouldn't think that would make us unique, but all you have to do is look at the California Supreme Court last week, where they did this unusual thing with single-sex marriage, and you might understand how indeed unusual it is. Well, this court has been very successful at this. It's a small majority, narrow majority, 4-3, where this philosophy pertains. We have been very successful in bringing the Michigan legal culture to a different position. And because of that, we have become quite noteworthy in the country, and I think that's probably what the Wall Street Journal was making reference to.
Why is that important?
What the Wall Street Journal thinks?
No. Why is it important that your court has made strict interpretations of the law? What are the ramifications for people watching today?
The ramifications of that are that rather than having judges make the most important decisions in the society, such as who can get married, what kinds of people can get married, to use the most current example, we are inclined and in fact do leave that to the people's elected representatives, in a sense, not to be too grand about it, but it is a position which leaves representative government with the people, as opposed to muscling the legislature out of the way and saying what we think the law should be.
So there are ramifications for my constituents on the makeup of the court. It's going to affect, or could affect, their daily lives and the operation of their businesses and such.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it affects them in the sort of grand sense in their capacities as citizens, in the sense that all of us have a stake in how the country is governed. I think it's important that people understand that this court is very deferential to the legislative branch. We feel that the way the United States structure of government works is that the people make their rules through the legislature. They don't make them through the courts, because courts are not representative bodies. They're not intended to be. Legislatures are. And the legislature and Senate in this state have established a good deal of statute law in this state, and we have had the opportunity to interpret that, and I think we've interpreted it consistently with what the legislature intended. This is many times not such as to make the powerful interests happy. Those who would prefer the legislature have done something else make their way to the courts and attempt to get the courts to do that. Powerful plaintiffs' lawyers in Michigan, the personal injury lawyers, very frequent litigators with that goal in mind. We have to date been able to hold the line on this, and I think we will continue to do so as long as we have 4 votes. I am the 4th vote, so it's, in fact, any one of us is the 4th vote as it works out, but I happen to be up for election this year, so my vote is the one that's at issue.
You mentioned the recent decision in California, which had to do with the marriage. What are some of the other arenas where the court, speaks? What are some of the other themes that come before you?
Well, just to touch base on the California case just one more moment, there's an interesting contrast possible here between the Michigan Supreme Court and the California Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court did, as you say they did, the very same week the Michigan Supreme Court did a relatively opposite thing, where we upheld the Proposition 2 that the people enacted by a 58% margin, saying that state employers, that is, employers, the state government as an employer, county government, and so on, could not offer same-sex benefits, because that's what the people had said in Prop 2. It's their call on these things, and they made it, and we were willing to defer to them on this, no matter what our personal views might be on this. You then have a very interesting contrast between 2 great courts in the country, and people can draw from that what they will, but I think it is an interesting and easy one to deduce some lessons from. Now, as to what the court does in addition to things of that kind, we are, of course, the final appellate court in Michigan, where everything that comes through our state courts, all 350 or so of them that feed into us, we get the final call and have the duty to make the final call on those cases that are appealed up to us and accepted for argument. This includes all the criminal law in Michigan, all the civil law in Michigan, and of course all the law concerning children and divorce and so on. So it's a very large responsibility, and it's one that is sobering to have.
Now, you mentioned earlier that your position is up for election this year. And I know that the system varies from state to state as to how our Supreme Court justices are elected or nominated or chosen. Could you maybe just contrast with us for us a little bit Michigan's system, how you're nominated, how the election works?